A brand new study on caffeine just broke a ton of Huberman bros' hearts. Sorry, Optimizer bros, but guess what? You can drink your coffee after all. Hey guys, my name is Joel Runyon. Welcome back to the channel. If you don't know what to write, drop a lightning bolt or a battery charge because I'm gonna need some energy to deal with all the haters after this video. If you're in the optimizer world, you might have heard that you shouldn't drink coffee for the first 90 minutes of your morning. It got really popular and a whole bunch of people were bragging about how it completely changed their morning routine.
Stop drinking coffee after waking up.
What you want to do is wait a minimum of 60, preferably 90 minutes.
You'll have way better energy throughout the day.
Just this tip alone has been huge for me.
For me, this protocol has been better for my body and productivity.
But there's only one problem with that. It's not true. A new research paper in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition took a look at common questions around caffeine, and this was one of them. Before I get too far into this, I have to give a couple shout outs to a few different people. I first saw the study in the write-up from Menno over on Instagram. And secondly, Chris Williamson. He was one of the guys that jumped on a bandwagon.
You definitely don't need caffeine within the first 90 minutes of your day.
But to his credit, when new research came out, he was the first one I heard it from. He actually posted this meme, which made me laugh pretty good. So kudos to Chris for owning it. And it's a good reminder that you can always update your mode of thinking with new information. I think he's actually redoing his ad reads right now. So what does this study actually say? Now stick with me. I don't like to read on camera, but I want to get the words right. So on some of these, I'm going to read. So what's the study actually say? There's been a trend mostly on social media to recommend delaying coffee ingestion in the morning by anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes to as much as 90 to 120 minutes after waking. The primary rationales are to prevent prolonging the waking cortisol peak because adenosine levels are still declining during this time, and or to avoid an afternoon crash that some claim can happen as caffeine is eliminated from the system. However, the validity and utility of these claims are questionable at best, and in some cases not supported at all based on the available scientific evidence. Here's the details directly from the journal. In summary, though there may be an upside to delaying morning caffeine intake under conditions of sufficient sleep, this has to do with the magnitude of effect rather than the proposed mechanisms related to prolonging the cortisol peak, continued declines in adenosine, or avoiding an afternoon crash. A significant drawback in the argument related to cortisol is that a similar effect occurs with the intense resistance exercises performed soon after waking. Following this line of reasoning would imply that this type of early morning exercise should be avoided. However, this notion makes no scientific or pragmatic sense. The suggestion that adenosine continues to decline upon waking is also scientifically inaccurate and not supported by research. There is also no evidence that caffeine ingestion upon waking is somehow responsible for an afternoon crash or that delaying consumption would somehow prevent this if it did occur. Now, personally, I've seen this most on Dr. Huberman's podcast.
I recommend delaying your caffeine intake to 90 to 120 minutes after waking.
I'm not sure of any place else I've seen this trend play out other than other people referencing his podcast. Now, personally, this is one of my pet peeves where people use science to gaslight you into believing something that doesn't really make that much sense. If you've ever taken a coffee in the morning, you have the evidence that it usually works pretty well. This is one of those things that gym bros figured out a long time ago by self-experimenting and trying things out on their own. I call this the Tao of the gym bro. It's sort of tongue-in-cheek, but in the long run, the gym bros know what's up way before the scientific consensus does. It's kind of a joke, but I wrote a blog post on it, and it's accurate way more often than you think it would be. So it's worth noting that if something doesn't make sense on its face, your gut might be telling you something. The second part of this revolves around the adenosine system. This is basically a neurotransmitter system that helps regulate sleep. Now we're going to go from the research. There's a rapid increase in adenosine in the transition from sleep to waking, which then stabilizes across active hours. The inverse response occurs at sleep onset with a rapid reduction in the first couple hours, followed by plateau. Now, the common claim is that the adenosine system is not active for the first 90 minutes of your day. This is just not true. Well, in the morning, if you're properly rested, the caffeine might have the least effect. But if you're suffering from lack of sleep at all, you actually may benefit from quote-unquote a higher dosing. And the study actually references 4 to 5 cups as that higher dosing. So how about that? Additionally, the performance benefits of caffeine are not blunted by the adenosine system. Caffeine can improve your performance metrics by using other neurons beyond just the adenosine receptors. So if you're taking caffeine in combination with any sort of workout regimen in the morning, you're still going to get the performance benefits of caffeine regardless of whether or not your adenosine system is online, which turns out it is anyways. The other reason you'd want to supposedly delay caffeine consumption is the cortisol spike that happens when you drink it. It doesn't sound ideal to have a big cortisol spike to start your day. However, this seems to be overstated. There's a claim that cortisol might spike upon consumption, but this seems to be blunted with any sort of habitual use. And if you use caffeine a lot, it might be completely negated. Sorry. Also, other activities like intense exercise can also spike cortisol. So if we're gonna use that line of thinking, this would mean that you need to avoid all working out in the morning, which is not only not true, but also not practical for a lot of people. In the research, they say this. Using that logic, it's also worth noting that cortisol excretion happens after high-intensity exercises, and that's clearly not true across the current evidence. The last reason people would say that you want to delay your caffeine intake is that it causes the afternoon crash. But there's not a lot of evidence for that either. If you follow that advice and pushed your caffeine consumption till later in the morning, you might just see that afternoon crash take place later in the afternoon. Not only that, but you might disrupt your circadian rhythm and screw up your evening sleep cycle, if you are that sensitive. The review actually mentions that if you do have an afternoon crash, you might benefit by taking an additional dose of caffeine in order to push through. I know I'm biased, guys, but I gotta say, I kind of like this research. The best research when it comes to delaying caffeine is that if your sleep schedule is perfect, you'll probably get the least benefit about taking coffee immediately upon waking. But if you're running a deficit on sleep of any kind at all, you're probably going to get a benefit out of your morning coffee. And if you're doing any sort of physical activity in the morning, you're going to get the physical benefits of that caffeine as well. So there you go. So should you delay your morning coffee for 90 minutes? I'm going to go with no. If you want to do something and tell other people that you're optimizing and have everybody pat each other on the back, go ahead. If you're doing it to have more energy and get more out of your workouts, the literature doesn't seem to back that up. So what can we take away from this study? First of all, it's okay to change your mind when new information comes along. Also, if something just sounds off to you from the start, listen to that, especially if it seems objectively wrong. Pay attention and be a discerning judge when it comes to that stuff. Next, a lot of optimizing culture revolves around this Protestant-style guilt trip. The idea that I'm doing something that I don't want to do, so it has to be good for me. But it's important to note that just because you're sacrificing something doesn't mean it's actually helping you. Whether it's foregoing caffeine in the morning, even though you don't want to because you heard it on a podcast, or drinking AG1, even though it doesn't taste good, but it's your nutritional insurance. Just because you're doing a consistent activity doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial to you. It does mean you're disciplined, so kudos on that. But you need to inspect if that action is actually going to help get you towards your goals. Next, just because someone says something on the internet, including me, if you can believe it, doesn't mean it's true. Unless it's me, in which case it's probably always true. Lastly, caffeine is actually good for you. I just did another video on this, but despite all the current social media trends against caffeine, the evidence for caffeine improving mental and physical performance is pretty much undisputed. So while other people might cut out caffeine for sensitivity issues, I'll let them do that. That's fine. But then I'm going to go take more caffeine and beat them. Sorry, not sorry. Caffeine is closer to a superfood than not. So if you want to learn how to get more out of your caffeine, go ahead and watch that video that I posted right there. All right, guys, that's it for the video. If you guys like the video, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment for the algorithm. If you guys don't know what to write, just leave a coffee cup emoji because Coffee Boys is back on the menu. If you guys want to try a better source of caffeine in your life, check out our clean energy drink mix called Impossible Energy. It's got 200 milligrams of caffeine, but it's packed with nootropics. So you get all the performance benefits of caffeine without the jitteriness or anxiousness that you're going to get out of other caffeine products. You can also check out our sleep performance product called Impossible Sleep at impossible.co. We also just released a short documentary on an extreme sport called death diving, so you can go watch that, get inspired, add it to your impossible list, and go do more impossible things. If you guys want to follow along in the future, you can find out everything about Impossible at Impossible HQ, and you can find me at Joel Runyon on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next video. Boom.